Travis Brown with the Eagle here in the Eagle newsroom. We're doing something a little weird today, but this is the world we live in. We're doing a Zoom hangout. We want to just talk about A&M sports because we haven't gotten to do that in a while. But we're all in the same room. This is a Zoom of three people who are all in the same room, and that's okay. We have the great Robert Cessna on this Zoom chat, uh, and also Alex Miller, the young go getter. So we want to go ahead and say if you have questions, if you have comments, go ahead and fire those things in to either our Facebook or our Periscope broadcasts that are going on right now on the Eagle Twitter and the Eagle Facebook, and we can get to those. Talk about what you want to talk about with A&M Sports and how this thing is all gearing up. Otherwise, we have some other things we want to talk about as well. So that being said, Alex over here will monitor all of that fun stuff on the social medias, but let's just start with the relief that we have right now that it looks like we're going to have a football season. See, Alex, did you think when we were sitting here right now that we would be playing football here in about what 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
No, I thought it'd be later. I was guessing that we'd have problems and they'd move it back. And even when they said they were going to start it, when they did, I thought there'd be some hangups, some medical people would step in, what have you. But I think the fact is we saw a collegiate game last Saturday night. I did watch the end of Central Arkansas playing Austin P. There'll be a couple more games this week. I think if the two 3 games this week go off without too much of a hitch, no high COVID positive numbers after, then I think it'll be full steam ahead. Now, probably shouldn't say full steam considering the people that have suddenly starting to back out of this football across the country. And I know we'll talk about that, but it does seem that we will have football. The question is, who will be playing those games?
Yeah, Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely looked bleak a couple months ago, a month ago when Big Ten and Pac-12 decided they were going to cancel. Everything was definitely thrown into limbo, but you know, I was pretty confident that the SEC and the Big 12 were going to, especially the SEC, they were going to let it ride until the last minute, until it was literally impossible to play. And they've kind of gotten their ducks in a row. They've got, and, with every day passing with no news that things are possibly going to be canceled again, I'm more confident that the season's going to start for sure. So here we are.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, so since the last time we've actually gotten a chance to talk A&M football, a lot has come out. We have stadium capacities, we have game day procedures, we have a schedule, we have times, kickoff times for half the teams. We have who A&M's going to play. We've talked to some players. We have protests. We have all kinds of things happening. Cease, as we gear up here in the next couple of weeks, what has stuck out to you as kind of the most important things to sort through with everything that's going on right now?
I'm anxious to see exactly what game day will be like. From the time I get to the stadium, we all try to get there a couple hours before time. There's various radio shows, whether we go in the press box, how many people are going to be around the stadium or where they're going to be at. How does 25,000 people look in Cal Field? What's that going to be like? What's a half-field press box going to be like? I'm kind of interested to see because, I know you guys are doing the same thing. I'm a big hockey fan, so I've watched a lot of the hockey playoffs, not so much the NBA, watch baseball. Being played in front of empty venues on TV is not like being there. So I wonder what, like being at Cal Field, they even had 25,000 when they played Nobody's Gone back. When I got here 4 decades ago, they had more than 25,000. So what's 25,000 going to look like in a facility that should seat 110,000?
Yeah, for sure. And just too, what things are going to look like with the buildups. We have heard from AD Ross Bjork, and they were testing once a week as they came through fall camp. Here, starting, I believe next week is when they're going to bring in the third-party vendor, or it actually might have been today. I need to double check that, where they brought in the third-party vendor to start the 3-time-a-week testing that the SEC is doing at all the campuses. And so they're going to be tested 3 times a week. What happens if there's an outbreak? What happens if the entire quarterback room comes down with COVID, or that's the case for any school? I mean, I think that's going to be the most interesting thing for me to watch is when we show up on game day, if all of a sudden the running with the first team is Hayes King because 2 of the quarterbacks got COVID.
Well, you bring up a good point because we're seeing people cancel practice. Well, once they have the games going on, you can't cancel practice, can you, unless you would go lose so many people that it wouldn't be a competitive game. And that's why you have, quote, 85 on scholarship, over 100. But at what point, they've talked about that, in AD meetings and coaches meetings, how many can you say, well, you still have to play? And when does that happen? At what game? It's one thing for A&M to lose 2 offensive linemen against Vanderbilt starters, but it would be another thing to lose them against Alabama or 4 offensive linemen. I don't think you'd want to go I don't think Kellen Mond would want to go to Tuscaloosa missing 4 offensive line starters, but yet what would be the protocols? Now, everyone hopes that doesn't happen, but with practices getting canceled as of last week, Auburn and a few others, you would think it's something we're going to have to deal with.
Yeah. Well, we had a question come in already on our social media channels. And if you have any questions, like I said, be sure to hop on Twitter, Facebook, fire those in. Alex, read them off. We had one early one here on the Twitters asking what's the capacity of Ellis Field going to be like for Texas A&M football games, the A&M soccer team. That's still up in the air. As far as late last week, we hadn't necessarily heard the official word, but when we were talking with head coach G. Gary on kind of the announcement of their fall schedule and everything, he says they're going to proceed and operate like it's the same rules that they're going to have at Kyle Field, which would be a 25% capacity, which is going to be a lot smaller naturally, of course, at Ellis Field. But he made the argument that a 25% capacity at Ellis Field for what the kind of crowds they usually get is going to be more than a lot of the places they would travel and play. So they'll still have a little bit of that home field advantage. So as of now, they're operating under the assumption that it's going to be 25% of capacity, like they said before. Cease, do you feel like this is going to be the case for all, and including when we get into volleyball and then even basketball, which is going to be the indoor sports?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see because what I could tell from looking at like the high school games around here, whatever they had their capacity, they would say that night, and we only had 1 week, it seems like less showed up. And I think it's going to be interesting, and that's why I think that A&M saying they can maybe handle all their, quote, season ticket holders, because I think a lot of people are going to stay away at first. Now, if A&M has, the Vanderbilt game goes off without a hitch, let's say they go down to Alabama, that game goes off without a hitch, it's an exciting game. I think, more people will want to come. And of course, if there's 25,000 for Florida, at what point maybe could local officials say, well, when can you go to 30%? When can you go to 35%? To me, it's football. You mentioned soccer. I really hadn't thought about that. And I hate to say that because soccer's not going to have a championship NCAA tournament. It's like right now, I think football to me is the key. How many people show up for this game? How many people want to go to those games that can't get into those games?
We have another question that came in. Alex, if you want to go ahead and read, you can. He just sent me in the question. You can censor it if you want to. We can go with the censored version, but go ahead and read it off, and we'll see what we can talk about.
We've got a question from our friend Henry, and he wants to ask: is Texas A&M going to kick Alabama's butt this year, or is A&M going to give them a pass? This is an intriguing matchup because, as we know, A&M was originally supposed to play Alabama the second to last week of the season, and now they're playing them in week 2. So, Travis and Cease, what do you see from the change in date between the A&M Alabama game and the Aggies' chances against the Crimson?
Well, I think anytime it's tough to go to Alabama and win unless you've got Johnny Football with you. And number two, it's the home opener. You can say, well, there's only 25,000 people there. But yeah, the one guy that counts is Saban. Unless he's got COVID, he's going to be on the sidelines. And that's just a tough place to go play. And I think the earlier in the year is even worse because it's a home game. Alabama's going to be tough to beat there, and I know A&M's got this experienced team, but going in there, how good is their offensive line? How good is their secondary? I'm talking about A&M. That's just a tough first road game. You look at even the history of Jimbo and Mon. They haven't done well on the road. Yeah, they've had tough opponents in their 2 years together, but it doesn't get any tougher than Alabama. So that's just a very tough game. Now, the flip side of it is, hey, I'd rather know where I'm at right off the bat. We're going to know a lot about that offensive line. We're going to know a lot if Spiller can rush for 100 yards at Tuscaloosa. We're going to know if can Mon not have a turnover at Alabama. And then whatever I didn't touch, I know Travis will cover.
Yeah, I think that the if you wanted to look at this glass half full as a glass half full A&M maroon shaded glasses fan, you could say that that trip to Alabama might have all of the SEC West hinged on it, because I think that a lot of people, if you look at a lot of the projected win totals, A&M is coming in third or fourth, if you want to say third, behind LSU, behind Alabama. Well, I just don't see that LSU is going to be remotely the same team as they were last year, especially with the announcement that their wide receiver Chase, probably their best player, is going to opt out of the season. They lost their defensive coordinator. They lost their first overall draft pick quarterback. They lost a lot, and I just don't see them as the same team. I see A&M as the better team than LSU. The real X factor there too is going to be A&M Auburn, which is something we can get to in a little bit, but if you want to look at it glass half full, A&M was maybe going to be rolling into Alabama at the end of the season last year with potentially an undefeated record, and that could have been for the West title. Well, now if you want to look at it the same way, if you think A&M still has that same kind of firepower, they could be rolling into Tuscaloosa week 2, and that could be for all the marbles in the SEC West. If you want to look glass half full, do you think that that's too outrageous, either of you?
No, I think that's a fair take. It's definitely going to be a tone setter for the season, as C said. You get Alabama, then you come right back home and play Florida. I mean, A&M could start 3-0, A&M could start 2-1, A&M could start 1-2, and it'll be interesting to see where things go from there. And last year A&M played Clemson on the road week 2, and it didn't go as well as the previous year's matchup for the Aggies. And I feel like a few weeks after the game, Jamon or Kellen said, we were too amped up. We were trying to win too hard. These big game environments year after year, it'll be interesting to see the approach that they take this year, especially with that game so early on.
Yeah, it all gets down to mistakes early. We've seen it all over. And A&M's got a new punter. You take even the littlest thing to go on the road, and A&M has great punters. And I know the guy, the Australian, the long name, he punted like one time last year for 57 yards. But punting in Alabama, taking a snap for the first time in your own end zone or whatever, that's just so tough. And you're going to be kicking to one of the best returners in the country. I mean, even the special teams, things like that, you look that you got to give the edge to Alabama probably early, and they're playing there. And we're hopping all around, but Travis hit on that. I just don't see LSU. LSU, I didn't have them as a top 10 team before Chase. I saw somebody pointed out the other day, on their depth chart. And we know the depth chart always inflated. Depth chart for the national championship game, LSU's lost 26 players from that depth chart. Yeah, you can still say they have like 30 left, but we know a lot of those guys. I mean, that's a lot of losses. That's a lot of guys that were playing. That's a lot of guys you expected to play. And I get it. LSU has lost, but they don't have that much talent. I think LSU might be a 6-win team this year, a 6-4, what have you. I mean, when you start looking, who are they going to beat with a new quarterback, with a new lineman, new defense, new everything, new coaches? If you're A&M, you almost want to play them there this year to get them back at your place, because I think LSU is going to lose like at least about 6-4 or something like that. I don't think they're going to be a top 4. And that's why it'd be great if A&M would play them early. And late, they might have some players. The schedule just doesn't work for A&M unless they can go to Alabama and win or beat Florida. If they come out of that 2-1, at least, then there's going to be a lot of hope for everything they want if they come out of that 2-1, because that means they beat either Florida or Alabama. But if they don't win either one of those games, they're behind the 8 ball. And it's hard to play catch up in the SEC, particularly with no Troys matched in, no Fresno States, no Sam Houston States. Every week you got to show up, and we're all assuming A&M will beat Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arkansas, South Carolina. But after getting beat up sometimes and a win, those games are tough.
The biggest news that has kind of come out so recently with A&M is the few more players that have decided to opt out. Initially, the only guy was James Foster. He was he's a quarterback who we all thought was going to. He said he was going to enter the transfer portal, and the next thing we know, he's back on the roster, and then that he is going to opt out of the season. Elijah Blades, who was scheduled to be one of A&M's starting quarterbacks, opted out for undisclosed reasons. And then Derek Tucker, a safety, came out on Twitter yesterday and said that he is opting out to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Cease, I know you did a story yesterday, and you can find it on theeagle.com right now about A&M's cornerbacks and the secondary. It kind of seems like a lot of the focus now is on the defensive secondary with a few positions that might be opening up.
Yeah, it's interesting that when you look across the landscape of college football, as we all do, I got to give kudos to A&M's team and Jimbo, so to speak, of really keeping everybody in-house. We see people opting out a lot the last couple of weeks. A&M's losing 3 people, but really only 1 of substance. Blades, you could say, was going to be penciled in there as a starter opposite Jones, but he had so many injuries last year. And you listen to what Jimbo said 3 times he talked to us. He talks so fast and puts those, about 5 clauses in a sentence. I love myself. And he said when, Blades, nice back on the field. So that means, remember, he didn't play the last 2 games last year. So I think Blades decided, being a transfer, I'm going to sit out a year. I'm going to get 100% healthy. I'm going to go ahead and get Schmidt, get me on the weights, get to be ready because I want to go play in the NFL. So I think that was a smart move. Tucker wasn't going to play much, if at all. Foster wasn't going to play. So the fact that A&M's kept all those other players, saying they're going to play, I think speaks a lot for the team chemistry. I think speaks a lot for Jimbo. And losing Blades could hurt. Yes, it could, because just think about it. They should have had Renfro and Jones starting. That'd be pretty good starting cornerbacks, because if they get beat out, that means they get beat out by better players. Well, now they only have Jones because Renfro went to the NFL. Blades is gone. And so now we can sit there and say, all these guys look good, but in the SEC, you have to play good. And, so cornerback suddenly becomes a question mark to me. The secondary becomes a question mark. Yeah, Joe Burrow's not around anymore, and maybe the quarterbacks aren't as good as they faced last year, but it's still the SEC. You got to have good coverage. I mean, this defense didn't beat Bo Nix like it should have as a freshman last year. So I have questions on the secondary. But the fact that they have so much potential. I talked to a guy today. I was on the Tennessee radio show, whatever. And it's funny, you think about it, he goes, well, you don't need defensive linemen. He's talking about A&M. You know, we all know how good Clemens can be. We all know how good Marvin Leo could be. We know how good Martin can be. But, you know, these guys haven't really proved it yet. I mean, some of these guys need to step up. We know PV can be good, but is he going to be a first or second round draft choice? So I think there's work to do on that defense. But getting back to your original point, Travis, I think it's amazing the players that haven't gone on, that I'm going to set out or I'm going to do. A&M hasn't lost people that's going to cost them games.
Yeah, well, you know who might be the first man up, or one of the first men up to try to claim that spot is Caldwell's own Devin Morris. He was a guy that started to see a little more playing time in that third down package that they brought in last year, where they took out. I'm trying to remember the logistics of that. They took out a linebacker to put in an extra defensive back, but then also ran Aaron Hansford out there as one of the linebackers
Right.
too, to kind of give it a little bit more of a dime feel. On third down, and Morris had some good plays. And, you know, I was out there talking to some Caldwell people last week, and they're actually people out there thinking it might be a good breakout season for him, and that could be definitely one of the easiest options to fill into one of those positions.
Yeah, without a doubt. When you look at, I like the talent base, what Jimbo's done now in 3 years, because these guys need to step up. They need to play up all SEC caliber. See, that's my knock when you look at this team. Until they get 2 or 3 offensive linemen, that at the end of the year you go, hey, those guys should be up for all SEC honors. We're not saying that. We want to say that about Kenyon Green one day. But at the end of last year, A&M wasn't really plugging anybody for all SEC linemen, one of their linemen for all SEC honors. And until that happens, I think the offense is going to have its struggles against quality teams. And I think that's why everybody talks to this pivotal year, third year. Jimbo's had, a lot of time to evaluate this talent. Same thing with Elko. It's the third year. They need to be, one of the elite teams in the SEC, but will they? They're, I think the schedule screws them. They changed that, but still, then you make your own way. But you hit it on the head, Travis. They need a Devin Morris, a guy where the rest of the guy goes, where is that guy? Well, no, they developed him the last 2 years. We all know Leal could be an all-conference player. Well, okay, he needs to do it. Same thing with Peavy. Then when people are saying, hey, where did those guys come from? That's, the LSUs and the Alabamas, they just seem to, put those guys out, Waddle, whatever, they're 5 stars, whatever. Bobby Brown, he needs to show why Alabama wanted him. He needs to be an all-SEC defensive lineman in the middle that nobody wants to face. A&M needs more of those guys. And in year 3, you're not going to get 10 or 12 of those guys. That's only Alabama. Can A&M, and I don't know if you guys saw it. Here's a good question. I saw the guy at Saturday Down South listed the top 25 players in the SEC. I don't know if you guys saw that. And I looked at that last night and I was amazed. He had Mon number 25. Okay. 1 to 25 with Chase Langon, but he had Wiedemeyer way ahead of him, and he had Osmond way ahead of him. And I'm thinking, would you guys, who do you think are A&M's top 3 players right now?
That's such an interesting thing to think about, because you're gonna have.
That's what I thought. I got me thinking.
You're gonna have Mon's gonna have to have a good season. Probably, you would expect for either of those 2 guys ahead of him to have a good season. Now, I know that you can analyze and scout players just on their kind of raw abilities without necessarily knowing, for instance, Christian Kirk, his senior year, didn't really have anybody who could throw the ball to him, but he still was projected high and came out. So you can look at it that way. But I think maybe the guy that probably does have the biggest upside of that group might be Wiedemeyer. I think that he has really proven that he can definitely be a threat and be someone who could move on to do big things from here. But I'll admit it. I think Mond's a pretty good quarterback. I think that Mond has had several seasons of having an offensive line that just can't do anything for him, and so he hasn't had time to go through his progressions, time to be able to read the defenses properly and things. I think that no, he's not going to be a Heisman candidate or a Davy O'Brien winner or anything like that. But I think that you don't necessarily need that in your quarterback to win in the SEC. How many times, and I know it's rough to compare A&M to any of the old Alabama teams, but how many times did Alabama just have a placeholder, not a placeholder, but just a system manager in at quarterback, and they won national championships? I think that Mond is a better than average quarterback. I think he's a quarterback that can win games in the SEC. And I think that's necessarily all that you need sometimes in the SEC. I think that defense wins. And if you want to look at a position that has, and I've kind of veered off your question a little bit here, but if you want to look at a position group right now that maybe is more concerning than quarterback or Kellen Mond, I think it's definitely going to be right now the defensive secondary with everything that's happened, like we just talked about, especially, and this is something that someone brought up to me the other day, when they go play uh, Mike Leach's wild butt circus out in Starkville in a offensive air raid system that none of them have probably seen since high school.
Yeah, as far as go ahead, C's.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna say, as far as A&M's top players, Mond and Osmond definitely have to be up there. I would say it probably goes some like Leal, Weidermeyer's definitely in that conversation. Buddy Johnson, I think, has to be thrown in there. I think he has shown he is very reliable in running in the run stop. But yeah, Cease, go ahead with what you were saying.
No, you brought up some good points there, and it's like food for thought when you start thinking of you had to put A&M's top 5 players 1 to 5 and how that affects the team. And when I read that last night, I go, that's interesting because Wiedemeyer has a chance to me to be an all SEC tight end that kind of goes on in the NFL that can block and do it all. But yet it's better if Moss was a little bit higher. It'd be better if Spiller was a little bit higher. When you see the guy had like 5 or 6 offensive linemen, and I go, boy, it'd be great if A&M had 2 of their guys in the top. So suddenly when you start looking around the SEC at the top 25 and where A&M's best players are and where they rank, you can see why they're having problems moving up that ladder because they don't have enough linemen down. When if you really know your linemen, like this guy did, he had a lot of Alabama. He even had like 2 Kentucky linemen. That's why Kentucky's been good lately because they've developed these linemen. And so once again, it's just I was just interested to get your guys' take because once we talk and we're rambling around, it gets back to can you have a playmaker on both sides at all 3 levels? Like, can you have it at quarterback? Can you have on the line? Can you have it running? Can you have a linebacker? Can you have a defensive lineman? Can you have a secondary? And A&M's missing some of those spots. They need people to step up and be one of the potential top 10 players, 15 players in the league at that position.
Well, and someone that probably was left off that list that actually might have an argument there too is Anaya Smith. I know we haven't seen a lot out of him yet, but if you want to talk about potential and from what we have been able to see, I mean, he could have a kind of season like Weidermeyer had last year at running back, getting just more opportunities, not to mention you factor in the punt and kick game. So I think Anaya Smith is someone that you have to definitely throw in that list. But yeah, the more I think about it, if you want to think about it in the context of who's going to be good during the season, it's a weird list to think about it. But if you want to think about it as who's going to be the best draftable players, I do think that Osmond and Weidermeyer probably have a better shot. Granted, Weidermeyer is not there yet, but at least Osmond would have a better shot at getting drafted higher than Kellen Mond if he had a good season this year. So I can see that argument. Let's veer off to one more thing here, and then we can go ahead and wrap this up. We have so much to talk about. It's been a while since we've done one of these with just the 3 of us, so we can fire one of these up later next week and get some other things. But something I was thinking about too, as we go through this schedule, we're starting to get kickoff times. We know who A&M is going to play. What do you see as the most key game this season for the Aggies? What if you just have to take a 35,000-foot view on this season? What is that one game that you have circled that might be one of the biggest one for the Aggies moving forward? Alex, go first.
Okay. You know, I would have to say it's got to be week 3. It's got to be week 3 against Florida because here's the thing: A&M plays Alabama week 2. They're not expected to win that game. If they won that game, that'd be big. But Florida is a new addition. It's one they weren't expecting to play. Florida is kind of in the same boat as A&M as they're trying to get over that hump and get into the title contention. It's Florida at home. It's a tone setter. If you lose that Alabama game and you come into the Florida game 1-1 and you lose to Florida, then all of a sudden you have to go on the road at Mississippi State. That's a sneaky game. A&M's lost there before at 11 a.m. It totally derailed their entire 2016 season. But if you beat Florida, then there's momentum built there. And you can see A&M riding out the rest of the season as favorites, close out victorious and go maybe 9-1 or 8-2. But if you lose from there, that's where things start falling apart potentially. And so I see that week 3 game being very pivotal early on, kind of setting the tone of what is this A&M team? What kind of potential do they have to be a contender in the SEC? Cease.
Yeah, that's why Alex is not a junior. He could be a senior. I said all along, it's Florida. Don't see them beat them. Then they come home and people will be saying like, "Oh, this here goes sky's falling again. They're not going to beat these top 10 teams. Where'd the easy schedule go? This is A&M's not going to get it done in Jimbo's 3rd year." So all this doubt's going to be hanging over the program. And trust me, hope I'm wrong. All they got to do is beat Alabama, and that won't be the case. But I just think Florida is such a huge game because on paper, I would think Florida might even come in a 1 or 2, 3 point favorite in that scenario if A&M is 1-1. And then if you go 1-2, you've almost lost a chance to be one of the top 4 teams in the SEC. And I'll tell you why, because we went through this under Sumlin, and even went through this last year under Jimbo to a certain extent. You lose the games like last year when they come back and they win 4 games in a row. They beat 4 nobodies. Oh, here you go. They can have the great finish. Then you turn around and you lose to Georgia and you lose to LSU. We've seen someone do that a lot. 4-0, lose a couple games, beat three crappy teams in a row. Then you lose your last 2 games. It's all about momentum. And that Florida, SEC didn't do A&M any favors with the schedule by doing Alabama and Florida back to back. Most people would lose to them. But when A&M's expecting so much in this offseason, we all knew this was going to be the easy schedule. A&M waited for this year. This was going to be the year, 10-win season in the regular season. And then suddenly they got to play Alabama and Florida. To me, if they don't beat Alabama, yeah, they could bounce back and end up being they're not going to win 6 in a row in the SEC if they're 1-2. The SEC is just too good, too many places. And then so you go 7-3. Okay, good luck on winning 6 out of 7 games in this league. And 7-3 would be pretty nice. But if you lose that Florida game and you're 1-2, you're probably looking at a 6-4 regular season.
Yeah. I'm going to go, and I kind of teased this a little bit earlier. I'm going to go glass half full Aggie season. And I think that the most important games, one most important one that I have circled, is the season ender at Auburn, because I think that is, if you looked at what A&M season was supposed to be scheduled before the revamped season, Auburn was the game that was the biggest question mark for me, that the one that would be easy enough for A&M to lose as much as it was easy enough for them to win. You throw in the fact, too, that they're probably going to have the best quarterback the SEC, the next best quarterback the SEC has to offer, at least the one that has the most hype heading into the postseason in Bo Nix, besides Kellen Mond. So that's going to be a big test for the secondary. So I think that Auburn is going to be one that I really have circled, because if they can get there, if they can maybe lose to Alabama, beat Florida, that Auburn game is going to be the difference maybe between, if there is a playoff, the playoff or not, or kind of achieving their dreams or not at the end of the season. So I think Auburn is going to be pretty key. I also, just for the fun of it, just have circled their first matchup with the Pirates with Mike Leach is going to be a fun one, because who knows what kind of system, what kind of thing they're going to plan for. And in the SEC, while things have spread out a little bit more, and it's a little bit more of a passing league, and you look at what Alabama was able to do with Tua and spread out the offense. If Alabama can do it, anyone can do it. But if Mike Leach brings in his true Mike Leach air raid and tries to run it at Mississippi State, it's almost going to be like trying to face Georgia Tech in the ACC. You're just got to have a completely different game plan. You just don't know what they're going to do, because it's not going to be quite the same as what you did before. And it's going to be give Mike Elko quite the handful. So I think that that's going to be another one to circle. But as far as pivotal games for the outcome of the season, give me Auburn on that one.
I like that, Travis, because I already thought ahead about a couple pivotal games. Just think about it. Whether you're Malzahn or Jimbo, I don't care what side they're on, but one of them 7-2, and one of them 6-3. They're both on the hot seat. Those fans are in Auburn. I mean, every time Malzahn loses, they want to kick him back to Arkansas. So, I mean, just think about that game. I don't care, like if A&M 7-2 and Auburn 6-3 or vice versa. One coach is going to get a huge lift by winning that game, and the other coach, people are just going to be hot that Jimbo, his first time to try maybe get in the top four, couldn't get it done. Malzahn, again, fading at the end. That has the potential to be such a huge game for both those programs. And yeah, fans are hoping it's 9-1 versus 8-2 or 2 9-1s. And it could be, who knows? But you're right. That is a chance for, but once again, as we're talking, what are we talking about? It's the fact that it's the SEC. Every game is so huge. If you're playing Florida in week 3, it's going to matter a lot. If you're playing Auburn in week 10, it's going to matter a lot.
For sure. For sure. Alex, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Auburn's got a lot of question marks coming into the season. They got Bo Nix. He's established. They lost a ton on their defensive line. Derek Brown, Nick Coe, Marlon Davidson. They lost a lot on the offensive line. They lost their running back, Boobie Whitlow. I mean, there's a lot of question marks at Auburn. I think that's why I'm very hesitant to say Auburn's going to have a successful season, even though they have Bo Nix. But, playing them at the end of the season gives them a chance to figure that all out between week 1 and we'll see what happens the week before when Auburn plays Alabama in the Iron Bowl. A&M's playing LSU, but yeah, it's a 10-game SEC slate. Like they say, it just means more.
Stop it. Just stop. You make a good point, though, the fact that Auburn will be coming off the Iron Bowl because they've switched around how the schedule looks like that is going to be huge to face Auburn after they get beat up and they beat up on Alabama a little bit in that game. Everyone, thanks for joining us. This has been fun. We've kind of tried to be equal opportunity and bring some other people in that you can see and hear that aren't us through the summer, and we're going to probably continue to do that through the season to get ready for some of these games. But be sure to check theeagle.com, myaggienation.com for all of our good stuff leading up to the season. Like I said, Cease had a great thing on the cornerbacks situation today. Be sure to go listen to the My Aggie Nation podcast just dropped today. Great interview with Jeff Totes up at the Dallas Stars, who's an Aggie who is bubbled up in Edmonton. And be sure to reach out, questions, comments. We'll be doing this more often and just gearing ready for this A&M football season. Thanks, everybody, and we'll